Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Morning, honorable members. Oh, just a second.
Lubabalo. Hello.
Mr. Karim, good morning. This is Estelle speaking. I suspect Lubabalo was just quickly receiving a call.
Yeah, well, now I'm sure he's ringing people, which is not his job, but he does it, and we appreciate it.
Yes, but we do
well,
actually have
case,
5 members, so the meeting can actually
No, I understand,
continue.
Estelle, you're getting too serious for so early in the morning. Well, I was going to ask him, but since you brought this upon yourself now by intervening, I thought instead of nothing happening, maybe you could sing a song for us, Estelle. I was going to ask Lubabalo to sing a DA song. So, we know the ANC songs. Let's hear a DA song.
I'll have
in
him.
Trivenda, preferably, please, Estelle. You brought it upon yourself. You're so close to Lubabalo that when we ask for Lubabalo, you intervene. So, Estelle, let's go for it. Belt it out. I don't think Dennis can sing the song anyway.
Chairperson,
so who knows? Nobody can correct you.
Chairperson, there's a very good DA song. It's actually a Queen song. It says, "We are the champions. We are the champions."
You can dream, eh? You can really dream. Okay, enough from me. Over to you, Lubabalo.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, including MPs and colleagues on the platform. Chairperson and honorable members of the committee, there's a matter that is reflected on the agenda.
Okay. We know the rules. With due respect, to save time, thank you for introducing yourself to us. We learned something new this morning. Can we suggest, colleagues, that we just move to the item, which is, obviously, we all know our chairperson, permanent chairperson is out of the country with our best wishes, and so we need to elect a chair. Is that okay, colleagues?
Honorable Ryder says yes.
Okay, good. Even Moletsane is enthusiastic this morning, so I'm sure he's going to vote for the person I would like to nominate.
I'm nominating Simon, so yeah.
Okay, colleagues, comrades, the norm obviously in the ANC is that when the chair is away, the whip is nominated. Unless the whip's not available, then we choose one amongst ourselves. And I would like to therefore nominate Mr. Njadu and hope we get a seconder. And there it is. Thank you.
Chairperson, in the absence of an objection, Chair, I would like to hand over to Honorable Njadu, Chairperson, to take over and chair the meeting, Chair.
Okay, do we need a second, Lubabalo, for the minutes? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, thanks. So we need a seconder.
Members, any seconder to The proposal.
Oh dear.
Oh, God.
In the interest of moving forward, yes, I'll second. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable.
Chairperson, I'm glad about that because there will be no walkout here by the 180 personally. No, but Mama Rakhani is meant to be connected, acting chair. You're the chair at the moment, because she's obviously having and she often does, in the Popo, a connectivity problem. And I apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Good morning. And also thank you very much for the confidence that you put in me to chair this meeting this morning, and to welcome all our stakeholders to this meeting, which I believe is a very important meeting. That Lubabala, in terms of as an acting chairperson of this meeting, that the content of this meeting is a briefing by National Treasury on expenditure performance on learners with profound intellectual disabilities and maths, and also a briefing from Eastern Cape Province and learners with profound intellectual, briefing from Free State Province. Can we just move on, Lubabalo? So that we just see the whole agenda, and then further is also a briefing from Limpopo Province and a briefing from Mpumalanga Province. So that is the agenda for the meeting. The meeting is scheduled for between 9 and 12. So we will manage our time as much as possible to deal with the matters as presented, so that we look in terms of keeping our time for this meeting of today. Thank you very much. Lubabala, so the first on our agenda will be the briefing from National Treasury to welcome all stakeholders, National Treasury, all the provinces. You are welcome, and we will immediately give over to National Treasury. Thank you very much.
Maybe acting chair, before you hand over to National Treasury, let me bring it to your attention, chair, that the Honorable Minister is on the platform.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lubabalo, and thanks very much for the Honorable Minister to be with us this morning, and welcome, Honorable Minister. You are welcome to the committee. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much. Then we will hand over to.
Thank you, Chair.
We will hand over to National Treasury.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. My name is Ukhalele Tsenkharegu from National Treasury. This morning, I'm leading the team. My DDG, Madije Ngaleni, has sent her apology. So Emmanuel Pile will do the presentation, but he's supported by myself and Hubuan Rankani, so will be available to answer whatever questions afterwards. Thank you, Chair. Emmanuel, please load the presentation.
Okay, you are welcome to continue.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Chairperson, honorable members of the committee, the Minister of Basic Education, and our colleagues from DBE and National Treasury. As you indicated, Chair, our presentation is on the MST grant and the Learners with Profound Intellectual Disabilities grant as well, for the 2021 financial year, as well as the first quarter of 22-23. The Math, Science and Technology grant, we'll start with that one. We did do presentations in prior years on this grant. members will be familiar with some of the outputs and also the purpose, but just quickly just to indicate that the purpose of the grant is to support the schools with resources, teachers, learners, in line with the CAP statement in terms of the improvement of math, science, technology grants in selected schools. So the key outputs of the grant in terms of school support is hardware and software. So you're looking at ICT. In terms of your workshop machinery, looking at equipment that's bought and installed at schools that's used for teaching, and the provision of maths and science and robotics kits that's provided to schools as well. Then there's also learner support in terms of learner support material and teacher training. So these are the core outputs of the grant. If you move over to the next slide. So the allocation of the grant is broken down into these few categories over here. So ICT, it says 34% there, but 34% applies to certain provinces, but some provinces receive up to 40% of their allocation towards ICT. And then it's split evenly between the other categories, such as workshop machinery, lab equipment, schools, and teacher support. And there's also a small portion available for administration as well. So this is how the grant is allocated across most provinces, except for the ICT, which varies between provinces. The next slide. So the spending across the provinces for the 2021 financial year, so it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of performance when we come to spending. If you look at Gauteng and KZN, for example, managed to spend their entire allocation of the grant, while we had some provinces that, or most provinces that did not spend a full allocation. I think from a quantum point of view, we're looking at Eastern Cape, where there's quite a bit of underspending, Mpumalanga and Western Cape. The others had underspending, but it's not as much as the other provinces. Just to indicate that although provinces did underspend at the end of the financial year, their underspending was subject to the rollover process. So if they were able to prove that the funds were allocated, were committed to projects, then the funds would have been rolled over to the new financial year. So just to give you some numbers in terms of what we provisionally approved, for Eastern Cape, we approved around 20 million. So although you see the underspending is quite a bit there, out of a budget of around 60 million, there was about 22 million underspending. 20 million of that will be rolled over, and it applies to most of the other provinces as well. Western Cape had about 8 million rand that will be rolled over provisionally, and Northwest and Free State 3.5 and 4 million respectively. So there is that process that's going ahead there. If you move over to the next slide. So just to see in terms of what provinces use the money to buy, in terms of what was actually delivered, in terms of the outputs. There are many categories of outputs that are on the grant, but we just selected 3 indicators, which consumes the most of the budget. And it's sort of core in terms of what is being delivered. But there is information available if members want it, in terms of the total range of outputs that you want performance information on. If you look at ICT on the top left-hand corner, now, as I indicated earlier, it consumes the most budget of provinces. Between 34 and 40% of the allocation goes towards ICT. Now, we had provinces that performed well in terms of delivering against what they targeted at the beginning of the financial year. Western Cape, for example, Northwest, Northern Cape, and Mpumalanga. But Eastern Cape and KZN really underperformed in these areas. But from Eastern Cape's perspective, it might be that the delivery was caused by the underspending that I mentioned in the previous slide. And there might be some catch-up that needs to take place over there. Limpopo as well, underspent or sorry, underperformed against this category over here. In terms of workshop equipment, yeah, so the I suppose similar sort of performance in terms of Western Cape performing well, but you'll see Northwest, although they performed well on ICT, they didn't deliver any in terms of these workshop equipment. Limpopo as well, but Gauteng overperformed quite significantly, so almost 3 times more than what they indicated as targets at the beginning of the financial year. So this raises a question also against, beside it being an issue of overperforming, was the target set right at the beginning of the financial year? So that needs to be clarified over there. The other crucial output that we identified or we highlighted in this presentation is around the teachers trained. And here as well, there has been good performance across most departments, provincial departments, with the exception of Gauteng, which did not report any teachers trained. Now that's a bit strange for us because one of the key outputs of this grant is to train teachers. So in terms of the reports that we received, we didn't have the information to report on that there. But then we had provinces that underperformed quite significantly as well, KZN, for example. And then we had significant overperformance, Northwest, for example. So there is a sort of mixed bag in terms of overperformance, underperformance, and no reporting as well, which is a concern for us there. And this is a key element because obviously the teachers that are trained will be able to perform a better service in terms of the outputs, and it's important for the overall performance of the grant. We go to the next slide. The MST grant for the first quarter of 2022-23. So here, normally when we look at spending on the first quarter, there's a sort of emphasis on saying that they need to spend 25% of the grant. But from our perspective, we look at what was transferred to the province versus what was spent, rather than looking at a straight line percentage of spending, because this gives us a better indication of what was planned and what was spent at the end of the first quarter. Now, the gray block indicates what was transferred, and transfers are usually transfers made in accordance with the projections of the business plan. So it tells us this is what the department planned to spend in the first quarter. And here as well, you'll see that is also a sort of mixed bag across provinces. Eastern Cape, for example, spent much more than what was transferred, while you have provinces such as Gauteng and KZN and Western Cape, Gauteng and KZN that spent significantly less than what was transferred. So this tells us that there is some inconsistency between what departments plan to spend and what they spend at the end of the financial year. Eastern Cape is an anomaly, and it could be that, remember, they underspent quite significantly the previous year, and might be they're paying through some invoices or catching up on some expenditure from the previous year, as we already indicated that they have provisionally approved the rollover for the new new financial year of around 20 million rand. So it's a concern for us, but usually in the first quarter we do have these sort of discrepancies, which sort of smooth out as we progress in the second and third and fourth quarter. So we'll be monitoring the expenditure on that one. Next slide, please. Similarly, as I said about the spending in the first quarter tends to be up and down, we have a similar situation with the performance indicators. So although there has been ups and downs, and some provinces performed and some didn't in the categories that we identified, there is a sort of issue in the first quarter where provinces, provincial departments do tend to struggle or not perform in terms of what they indicated as targets. But having said that, we would expect provinces, if you indicated, for example, that you want to train X amount of teachers in the first quarter and you don't do it, there must be a valid reason for that. If you look at ICT as well, looking at the first sort of output that we identified, you'll see most of the provinces underperformed on that, with the exception of Gauteng, which is a bit strange, because if you look at their spending, they underspent in the first, against what was transferred to them in the first quarter. So there is some discrepancies that we do note there. But then Mpumalanga and Northern Cape will be a concern that needs to be monitored, because nothing was delivered in the first quarter on ICT. Workshop equipment, Western Cape was the only province that did deliver as they indicated they would in the first quarter. And you'll see the delivery across other provinces is actually quite poor, with most provinces not delivering anything in the first quarter. But we'll come to that in terms of perhaps the reasons that we identified as to why delivery doesn't happen on a consistent basis. Teachers trained as well. You'll see there's quite a bit of underperformance across most departments. In fact, all provincial departments have underperformed on this particular output, but we will be keeping an eye on it. Could be an issue of planning or logistics or procurement that could have delayed this output. Next slide. So having looked through the evaluation report provided by the department, the quarterly reports, and our own analysis, we did sort of pick up some broad issues in terms of why we have challenges on this grant, especially when it comes to the performance indicators. So you would have noticed that there was some underperformance on equipment and machinery installed in schools. But we did pick up in some of our analysis that some of these machinery delivered to schools are not even installed at all, or sometimes it's installed late. And this obviously impacts teaching and learning in those schools. Critical for us is also the needs analysis that needs to be done by school for each province. And there are instances where machinery is procured where it's not needed, or schools that really need it have not been supplied with them. So there are gaps in terms of the needs analysis that's done by provincial department that needs to be augmented or improved, so that the schools that actually need the equipment receive it, and that improves the teaching and learning in the school. Important as well, when machinery are installed in school, is that there must be a provision for maintenance and repair as well, because if this is not done, then if the equipment is installed and within, let's say, 6 months, if there's a breakdown of the machine, then we're going to have the machine just stalled, and there won't be any teaching until the machine is repaired. And there are delays that we did pick up. Overall, we did find some instances of poor monitoring of the MSD program by the provincial departments in terms of monitoring their schools and ensuring that they have adequate machinery, equipment, LTSM, and those sort of things. And as well, you would have noticed that some provinces in our performance information had zeros amongst their targets and their actuals. It's because of inconsistent reporting, and some provinces don't report on that we picked up. That could be that must be resolved as well. This has been a issue that we picked up in previous presentations that we made to the committee, procurement delays, and this affects delivery for kits for maths and science, coding and robotics. Obviously, if these kits for these various categories are delivered late, it does affect learning and teaching in schools, and teachers and learners have to do catch up during the financial year. Next slide. So, Chair, we'll move over to the learners who performed disabilities grant. We did do a presentation on this as well, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was August in 2021. And the purpose of this grant is to provide necessary support, resources, equipment to special care centers and for the provision of education to children with severe to profound intellectual disabilities. The core outputs of these grants is the appointment of transversal itinerant team members appointed to target schools. So these are team members that are sort of roving teams that goes between schools to provide services to these learners. Training to team members, caregivers, and teachers, important as well. And there are issues that we picked up on that I will explain just now. And the provision of outreach services. If you move over to the next slide. Right, the breakdown on this allocation is, as you see on the screen, the 65%, the bulk of it goes towards compensation. And these are for the itinerant team members. So they provide very specialized services to these learners. So we have the occupational therapists, speech therapists, physiotherapists. So it's quite specialized training that they provide. So that's to provide for the compensation of employees. And because these team members move about quite a bit, so they move from school to school, you'll see their administration is quite large when you compare it overall as when you compare to other grants, because a large part of it is spent on travel and subsistence, accommodation, moving between schools. There is a portion allocated for LTSM, furniture and equipment, and training. 5% is allocated to that. Next slide. So the spending in the as at 2021, excuse me, there are quite a few provinces that underspent the allocation. If you look at Eastern Cape, Free State, Western Cape, and Limpopo did underspend the allocation, while Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal did spend the full allocation. And Northwest, well, I suppose it's full allocation, but they indicate that they spent all that was allocated to them. This is also subject to the rollover process, but the numbers that are the amount of rollover is not as significant as it was for the MST grant. There, next slide. Chair, there are many indicators or outputs on this grant as well, but we chose 4 that consumes the most of the resources and also are quite core to the overall delivery of the program. And as I indicated, if the committee requires the full range of outputs, it's available and we will be able to provide that. In terms of the transversal team members, so these are the teams of specialists that I mentioned earlier, it's generally good in terms of the positions that were filled by provinces. So you'll see, for example, Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Limpopo have almost fully appointed. The only concern for us on this particular output is the Northern Cape, which, although the number is small, they still, I mean, it'll make a big difference if those 12 were appointed in the full financial year. But overall, I mean, it's not too bad. Maybe 1 or 2 positions that needs to be filled there in the 2021 financial year. If you move over to the right-hand side, so I'll just deal with the right-hand side, the one on the top and the bottom, caregivers incentives. Now you'll see on the top slide, provinces generally performed well in ensuring that they were the appropriate number of caregivers incentives. In fact, most provinces, if you look at it, really had more than what they planned, with the exception of KZN there. So caregivers interact with the learners on a daily basis, so it's crucial that they are there, and the appropriate number is there as well to ensure that services are provided to these learners who require special care and attention. The concern is not so much the number of caregivers, well, with the exception of KZN, it's actually the number of caregivers trained because you'll see that the numbers that we have, some provinces have underperformed. If you look at Free State, Gauteng, KZN, going right up to Western Cape, all have sort of underperformed on this 1 year. We're highlighting this because although it's fine, you may have the number of caregivers, but the training that they have to make sure that they provide the required service to the learners is very important. And some of these, excuse me, the trainers have not been trained. The caregivers have not been trained according to what was planned and targeted for at the beginning of the financial year, and this will have an impact in terms of the services provided to these learners there. Assistive devices, excuse me. So assistive devices are your devices that are provided to learners that are mostly not mobile. So you're looking at wheelchairs, crutches, walking frames, and those sort of things. And here as well, we find underperformance, which is worrying because it means that this affects the learners, the learners in terms of their learnings, and also the support that they require. So Eastern Cape, for example, you look at underperformance there. Particularly concerning is Western Cape, which did not provide any assistive devices. Now it might be an issue of the devices were procured and not delivered, or there must be some delay in the system. So that's what we think it is, but maybe the province will be able to explain. Limpopo as well, where they targeted 100 of these devices, and none were delivered. And this clearly has implications for learners who are immobile, cannot be and cannot move around. So the key concern for us on this slide is the devices and the training that's provided to caregivers, which needs to be improved. Next slide, please. So Chair, as I indicated earlier, what we look for here is what was spent against what was transferred, rather than looking at a 25% spending. And here you will see that all provinces have spent less than what was transferred. So this tells us that provinces have underperformed in this quarter because, according to their business plan, they indicated that they would require this amount to be transferred because that's what they plan to spend, but they actually spend less than that. And you look at it, it's across all provinces there. And this is obviously will be a concern for us that we'll need to monitor, and the DB also needs to monitor this as well to ensure that come end of the year that the spending does not is actually improved along with the improvement in the provision of outputs there. So this is something that we will be monitoring in the second, third, and fourth quarter. Next slide, please. So the same indicators that we highlighted for the 21-22 financial year is what we've highlighted for the first quarter of the 22-23 financial year. And here you'll see that the transversal team members seems okay. Northern Cape is still lagging. In the previous year, it was they provided 7 out of a target of 13, and now it's still 7 out of a target of 13. While other provinces have generally provided these team members. There have been provinces such as Mpumalanga which can improve with 7 over there. And yeah, I think the others are generally okay. But we will be checking on the second and third quarter to see if these numbers are being filled there. The caregivers, yeah, Free State, we didn't have any information. So the chair, we looked at the reports, and I suppose we need more information in terms of why the data was not provided. But across all other provinces, there has been reasonably good performance there. But as I indicated, the issue for us is not so much the caregivers at centers, which is important. It's also important that they are trained adequately. And you'll see in the next slide, the slide directly below that there has been underperformance as well in the first quarter as well. which needs attention, because the training that they require is sometimes maybe specialized and may be quite different from the training that you would give to other categories of learners there. Assistive devices, you can see here the performance. It's actually almost non-existent. Here, a lot of these devices are part of the procurement process, and there could have been delays, but it's and most provinces didn't sort of plan to deliver this in the first quarter. So we'll keep a track on them on the second and third quarter to check that the devices are delivered as planned. The only anomaly here is Eastern Cape, which delivered 5. Yeah, it could be an issue of the devices that were supposed to have been delivered in the previous year, but delivered in the new financial year, and that's why we're having that anomaly over there. Next slide, please. So as we indicated, Chair, one of the issues we did pick up here was the training of learners, especially in learners with conditions such as autism. Some are under pressure due to them not being able to cope with the behaviors of children in different areas there. What we found was that although provincial departments do procure LTSM, so here we're looking at kits such as art kits, gross and fine motor skills kits, communication and language kits. So the issue is not so much the procurement, but more the storage and the management of these LTSM, which in many provinces have indicated as not having adequate storage. Now, this may lead to materials being lost, damaged, stolen, and if this is the case, then it would mean that the LTSM would have to be procured, or more would have to be procured, and put pressure on the budget. Then also affect the teaching and learning over there. There's the issue of high turnover of trained caregivers because of the stipend, not receiving the stipend from social development. Some provinces did highlight that. Some have also identified issues of children not being able to go to school because of transportation there, resulting in absenteeism and dropout rates. And given the drastic increase in transportation costs as well over the past few months as well, this is clearly an issue for parents. So might need some attention there. Care centers lack proper infrastructure. So beside the storage of the LTSM, some centers don't have rooms for learners to sleep during the day, and also for preparation of meals, which is a concern there. So we are aware that most provincial education departments' budgets are under strain, especially when it comes to infrastructure and the provision of infrastructure. But this should be looked at to ensure that at least these learners, because they need special case, it's not your learners in your traditional schools there that need the special care, especially areas to sleep in during the day. And then we did mention the issue of assistive devices, which were not delivered in some provinces, resulting from procurement delays and challenges. Next slide, please. So just some of our recommendations. We did mention the issue of machinery equipment delivered to schools not being installed late. So the planning must include the full sort of delivery cycle of that machinery, including installation, and also taking into account the repairs and maintenance as well. The needs analysis must be done thoroughly to ensure that a school that is in need gets it, rather than a school that is not. But I did mention the one about planning, and the provincial departments need to look at augmenting their monitoring and reporting capacity to ensure that they deliver, they monitor the the implementation of the grant, and also comply with the Division of Revenue Act requirements, which requires provinces to report on a quarterly basis all outputs that were planned for. And I did indicate that some have not reported on some indicators. Next slide, please. Right, on the learners with profound intellectual disabilities, this one year, the training of caregivers is key for us because of they are the frontline service delivery, interacting with the learners on a daily basis. And there has been underperformance on this. So the recommendation is that training must be delivered as planned. In terms of the LTSM, in order to minimize loss, damage, and theft, appropriate storage containers or facilities must be made available in centers. So learner transport generally has been an issue in many provinces, where provinces cannot afford it in terms of the ordinary school learners in certain areas. But this is an impediment for certain learners in this sector, and it should be considered as an area that needs attention. And the last one, as I indicated, we understand that provincial departments are already under strain in terms of the budget, but there needs to be some sort of work done towards providing appropriate infrastructure to cater for the unique and specific needs of these learners in special care centers. I think that's the end of it, Chair, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, National Treasury. Any further input from National Treasury?
No further inputs, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much to National Treasury. Let me then say that I think it will be proper that after the presentation of National Treasury, just to get an input from the Minister before we move on to the provinces, so that we just hear from the Minister any comments on the presentation.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Let me acknowledge all the members of Parliament who are here, yourselves, and the different members from different parties, but also provincial representatives. Chair, I would not want to take your time and really comment on the matters, except that as a department ourselves are monitoring on this expenditure, because it is a very important expenditure, especially it really relates to areas where, as the department, we are not at our best in terms of servicing children with special needs. So we monitor it on a regular basis and see how far we can help our provinces to spend the money as agreed, but also get provinces to support each other because it's a recent fund, and therefore the systems in department were not really at their best, but we're comfortable that provinces are beginning to find their feet and are procuring appropriately. What we're also focusing on is to make sure that indeed the services are also matching the expenses. So we're not only monitoring the expenditure, but the programs themselves. Because our biggest fear is that, which is how government works. If we don't spend the money, it gets rolled over. So rather than increase on the budget, you always get a reduction, and it is a problem because even the little money we have or that we get from Treasury is not able to address all the needs that sector needs. But we're looking at that, at training also our educators and getting the systems going. So Chair, I really don't want to take much of your time. I think I'm fine. Even with the next items, for instance, your maths and science, it will be the same response that we are monitoring as national office and working with provinces. So I won't come back again. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for the comments and as national, and how national is monitoring in terms of the spending for provinces, which we greatly appreciate as the National Council of Provinces, as also in terms of our role as National Council of Provinces, in terms of our role of oversight. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. So the members, we will make comments at the end. Now we will continue to give to Eastern Cape. Lubabala, you will, in terms of the provinces going forward, we will also monitor our time. We will then start with Eastern Cape.
Chair.
Hello, good, welcome.
Yes, Chairperson is Scott at this side. I just wanted you to request that we flight the report and request the HOD. I am accompanied by the HOD and the Chief Directorship that is responsible for this function. Can we then allow, without wasting your time, Chair, allow the HOD and the Chief Directorship responsible to make that presentation so that we can summarize accordingly, Chair? I just wanted to make that report.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thanks, thanks, Honorable Chair, Honorable MEC, Honorable members, MECs and colleagues. I'll just run through the Lspid grant, both the Q4 as well as the Q1. Can you move to the next slide? I think this is very, very clear. Can you move to the next slide? Now, this is the budget that we allocated for the last financial year, and we spent about 23 million of that. But we also received in the same year a rollover of the previous financial year, which we have spent a lot on, but unfortunately, because we could not pay, so that has been paid in the current financial year as part of the accruals. There is a slide, the next slide, that is explaining that. Next slide. Here are the accruals that we had to pay in the current financial year. Hence, we are also requesting the rollover, because this one is also eating on the budget of the current financial year. So these are the accruals, the things that we ordered last year, but we could not be able to pay. Those assistive devices, storage facilities, containers, the tools of trade, and so on and so on. Next slide. On this one, I think even in the presentation by the National Treasury, we had performed well. We had filled all these posts, but unfortunately, one of the chief educational therapists left for another province. So we have advertised that post, hence that vacant post there. We had already filled them, but unfortunately, one of them left for another province. We're advertising that. Next slide. I think this is just the blow by blow. Here we targeted 300 and we achieved 203. The reason being that the teams that we were using to roll out this program were a bit limited, especially around Chris Hani and Joe Gad. So we overstretched one team from Joe Gad, from Chris Hani. So we have since expanded the capacity to deal with this challenge so that we don't miss our target. Next slide. These are the number of sites and the number of learners that have that have benefited. Next slide. These are the laptops that we have procured for all these centers. Next slide. In terms of the LTSM, we achieved all the key targets that we have set for ourselves for that first item. But on storage containers, we had challenge with the service providers. There's one service provider who could not deliver and had to return back the order, but another one delayed and only delivered this year. So that's why we could not meet that target here as storage facilities. But it's something that we're currently working on. On the assistive devices, there's the same thing. We ordered that 250, but some of the service providers are indicating that they had to order them maybe outside the country and all that, and that has caused those delays in terms of the deliveries. And this is what we have been able to achieve. Next slide. In terms of the training, I think that's where we have at least made some progress, except around the issue of educators as well as the therapists. It's something that we are currently working on to ensure that we improve in the two areas. Next slide. Here we are just reflecting on the number of learners who have benefited from these learning programs and the number of reports that have been issued, and 68 is the number of centers. So per center there's a schedule completed, but these are the number of reports that have been issued in those centers. Next slide. This is the current financial year, the quarter one. The budget is 28.3 million. We have received that 9 million, but we have spent. I think this one is in line with the presentation that was done by Treasurer. But we had already made some commitments about quarter one of 3.4 million. So if you add the two, and then it gets a little bit closer to 8 million, which is a bit closer to that 9 million that has been transferred already. So we do have spending, but also the commitments in the current quarter. Next slide. These are the number of learners that are participating in the basic skills, and these are the categories that we have identified for those learners. Next slide. We did not have procure the consumables for 2021-2022 because we still had some stock available. And in terms of the ICT, I think we had reflected on that one, that we had procured the laptops for all the 68 centers. Next slide. These are just the challenges and the mitigation measures, the late deliveries of goods, as I indicated, that have led to those to the under expenditure and in the process the accruals. The issue of the team in Jogabi, as I indicated, that assumed duties 4 months behind the schedule, hence the slight under expenditure there, and also the reasons why one team from Christian was overstretched. It was because of this delay in the appointment of this one. The reason for under expenditure in quarter one is the same as the above. Is because of that delay in the appointment of the above. Next slide. I think that's that's all. If you can please upload the science one. Thanks, Babalo. These are just the outputs as earlier presented by the Treasury, but I just want to talk to some of the things that we have also factored in here, the DPE Cuba support program, which is not covering all the provinces, but I think Eastern Cape, Gauteng, Limpopo, and KZN. We are also touching a little bit on that one. Next slide. This is the budget that we allocated across these different outputs, which is 52.1 million. With some adjustment, I think it was a rollover, maybe from the previous financial year, then which moved that money to 59.6 million. And we spent 38 million, and we underspent by 21 million. However, we had committed those funds. Those funds were already committed, although we could not spend because we could not spend the money because some of the things were not actually paid in that particular year. But we had already committed 19.9, almost 20 million of that 21 million. And hence, you'll see that in the presentation by Treasurer, there was a push on this in the first quarter of the current year. Next slide. These are the reasons for under expenditure. It's a delays in the procurement processes as well as delivery and the late commitment of funds. But the provisional approval of the rollover, this is what we have committed that money to. ICT, that's how we have allocated workshops and laboratories, teacher support and learner support is 9.7 million. So that's how we have committed that 19.9 million that I've reflected upon earlier on. Next slide. On the non-financial, we have provided these smart classrooms to 60 schools in terms of the ICT. And then in terms of workshops, we supplied those several technology tools to 9 schools, as well as electrical technology, equipment and consumable to 16, as well as mechanical technology to 7 schools. In terms of laboratories, equipment, these are the schools that we have been able to provide with the physical science 30, life science 30, agricultural technology equipment, 10 schools, and maths kit in 7 primary schools. Next slide. This is just the other areas where we have provided some support to learners. These are the learners that have been registered for Olympiads, learners that have supplied with the maths and science mind, the gap study guides, and also the teacher support, that is the training of teachers and subject advisors. So these are the numbers in terms of maths, physical science, life sciences, as well as the GET teachers in terms of training, 160 for technical subjects educators. With the DPE Cuba support, the training material has been developed and learner support material for grade 11 and grade 12, especially for maths and science, and also the participation in the teacher training in about 4 districts. Next slide. For this quarter, quarter 1 of 2022-2023, this is how we have performed. The actual expenditure is that 20, the reason why there is this huge movement, I think, as compared to what was expected to be spent, is because of those commitments that we made in the last financial year, in the 4th quarter. And then we made a lot of significant deliverables in the current quarter. So, but even here, we also have some commitments in the 1st quarter of about 2.9 million. Hence, there is that expenditure, which is about 37.6%. Next slide. So I think the province is at 36% expenditure, which is above the the straight line 25%. If you use the straight line in terms of the 4 quarters of the financial year. So I think that's the procurement plan. We is covering these areas in the current year. Your physical science, your ICT for FET, ICT for CAT and EGD. But also we are just waiting for a contract for the coding and robotics, and as well as the GET mathematics, natural sciences, and as well as the GET posters. I'm sure this is last slide. And these are just the challenges. Finalization of contracts, ICT procurement. I think the issue that we just need to attend to as the department is around the fast-tracking procurement and unlocking issues around procurement. I think we will be working with our Chief Director in the SM to assist us to unlock this problem. Next slide. I think yes. Thank you very much, Chair and honorable members.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the Eastern Cape. Are there any additions? Additions from the Eastern Cape? Okay. In the absence of additions from the Eastern Cape, Lubabalo, which the next province?
Thank you, Acting Chair. The next province is Free State Chairperson. As I upload the Free State presentation, Chair, I would like to indicate that we received an apology from MEC Mahwe, which indicates that the MEC is attending the cabinet meeting together with the HOD. So the leader of the Free State delegation is Mr. Sitole, if I'm not mistaken, Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to Babalo. Okay, can we then give over to the Free State? You're welcome, Free State.
Yes, Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, good morning, Honorable Chair. The official who's going to make the presentation on the grant is Ms. Kolane. She's the Director for Inclusive Education.
Welcome, Ms. Kolane.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable members, the Minister and protocol observed. I will be then presenting on the LSPID grant, which will then, according to the brief, look at the expenditure 2021-22, service delivery performance, and then the first quarter of this current financial year, challenges, and also the mitigating measures. Next slide, please. In the last financial year, we were allocated 29.3 million, and we received that exact amount, and we spent 21.1 million. The balance that was remaining by the end of March 2022 was 8.1 million, and we requested a rollover of 7 million. The reason being the payments that couldn't be dispersed, and also the procurement that was stopped because of the national directive. Next slide. On service delivery performance, as the province, we managed to appoint.
Oh, there's something disturbing.
Oh.
Okay, thank you.
Present. Maybe that's why not
All the mics are open. Let other mics be switched off, please?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank
The
you,
presenter
thank
can
you,
continue.
Honorable Member. Okay, coming to the appointment of the itinerant team, our target for educational psychologists, we're supposed to have 5 appointed, but we have vacancies of 2. For the educational therapist, we also appointed 3. We have a vacancy of 2. So all, in our itinerant teams, we still have posts that are not yet filled due to some resignation, and others, I think for one, the psychologist passed on, but we are, however, busy with the appointment processes to ensure that we have a full complement. Next slide. Procurement of tools of trade. We did procure tools of trade for the psychologist and also for the laptops. We also procured for the physio assistive devices for learners. From our assessment, all those that required assistive devices and required tools of trade, we did that. That is what we bought. Next slide. For the learning sites and learners supported, we have our 47 sites and 489 learners were supported. And we also are supporting our schools, our special schools for learners with severe intellectual disabilities. However, in those schools, we are looking at those that are having profound intellectual disabilities, which are 140, and we supported them. We don't have any learners that are at home and are supported then from home. Can we move to the next slide, please? Coming to LTSM, storage containers and assistive devices. For our 47 centers, we procured and delivered for all the 47 centers. And LTSM, there was LTSM that wasn't delivered due to the delay in procurement. And the storage containers, as most of our, some of our centers, they do not have safe structures where we can then know that the equipment won't be stolen. So then we normally buy the storage containers, but in the last financial year, we didn't buy any. Then the assistive devices, the target was 50 and we overachieved by 5. We bought 55 according to the need at hand. However, there were no additional financial implications to that. We were still within our finances. Then the transversal itinerant outreach team, when it comes to service delivery and the training thereof, the target was to train 25, but we didn't train. And the caregivers was to train 252. We also didn't train in the last quarter of the last financial year. And teachers, the target was 150, but we only trained 10. And therapists was 22, we only trained 3. And officials, only 1. Yes, there is an underperformance in this area, but also it was due to all the measures that were in place from the COVID to also then the procurement that delayed. Then service delivery performance on therapeutic services. Pardon?
Hello.
Chairperson?
Yes.
Can we request to see the presentation, please, on the screen?
The presentation is shared. The presentation is on the screen. Honorable Molotsabe?
Maybe it's my gadget. There's no presentation unless maybe it's the problem on my side.
Lobabalo, can you assist Honorable Molosane?
Okay, Chairperson, I'm going to ask Estelle to help him because I'm running the slides. The presentation is on the
screen. On the screen, yes.
Maybe Honorable Molosane may decide to log out and log in again. Probably this issue will be resolved.
Thank you very much. We can continue.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Then the therapeutic services. Our target, we always target the number of the learners that we have. However, based then on assessment, then they have then the therapeutic services according to their actual needs. So we for OT, occupational therapist, we render therapeutic service to 45 learners, and for PT it was 37 and 20. So what I'm saying is that then no learner that requires therapeutic services wasn't afforded the service, but then we afford according to the assessments. Thank you. The next slide. Then still on service delivery, facilitate the use of the learning program. All our learners are on the learning program, and all of them, they fully participated, and the report cards were issued. At school, those that were at school, they also participated. We are just looking at the challenge of the report cards. However, they are issued by the schools themselves, not the team. Thank you. Can we move to the next slide? On the issue of then the basic skills program, in the last quarter of the financial year, there was no learner that participated on that because we were then busy with the procurement of those tools that they needed. Next slide, please. With response to COVID-19, all our centers were given all the required equipment and services. Also with ICT for remote support, the laptops and printers. There was a delay with our laptops to the centers. However, now in this quarter, I will be reporting we have already issued them. And then coming now to the first quarter of this financial year, we allocated 27.1 million, and the amount that the first tranche was 1.5, and as a province, we've already spent 7.9. So I see now there's some discrepancies with the first presentation because 7.9 we've spent and the commitments are 676. Can we then proceed to the next slide? The challenge is due to the underdeveloped infrastructures that I've alluded to, and also the presentation from Treasury. We are having unsafe structures. So our mitigating measure is that we are addressing this through the bilaterals with social development, as well as us then buying the containers just for storage. That one, it talks to the storage. However, the conditions of the centers where our learners we're discussing that with social development. The limitation of administrative office for each district. However, at the province now, we have true interns allocated then administrative officials to ensure that the teams are not spending more time on administrative issues, but they spend more time on the learners themselves. This will also expedite the procurement because now we have more hands to get the quotations and everything that needs to happen. Next slide. Thank you. That is our presentation from the Free State. Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much. to Free State Province.
Thank you, Chair.
Any additions, Free State?
The input on the MST grant will be done by Mr. M.S. More, who's the provincial coordinator.
Thank you. May continue. Welcome.
Hello, Chair.
Yes.
I think, Chairperson, with respect to Free State, we're expecting them to only brief the committee on only one conditional grant, if I'm not mistaken, Chair. So I think we're done with Free State. I think we're moving over now to Limpopo, Chairperson, because the thing is, not the provinces were not expected, all of them, in fact, to brief the committee on both grants. So I think it's the Eastern Cape and Western Cape who are expected to brief the committee on both conditional grants. Other provinces is one, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's fine with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Then we'll move on to Limpopo.
Good morning, Chairperson, and also members of the committee, Minister and my colleagues, MECs, and everyone in attendance. I'm in attendance as the MEC and my HOD, but the person who leads us on the presentation is our DDG. Then I will hand over back to him.
Thank you,
Dr. Mpahlele.
And thank you, Honorable MEC. Over to the presenter. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chair. This is Koman Mpahlele, presenting on behalf of the Limpopo Department of Education. And we are requested to focus on the following items in our report. Is the expenditure for the last financial year and the service delivery performance and Q1 expenditure for this financial year and the challenges that contributed to under expenditure and mitigating factors. May I request that we move to the next slide? As it was also indicated by National Treasury, we will also focus on performance of the Lspid conditional grants for the last financial year and this quarter. If we look at the last financial year, Honorable Chair, the allocation that was given is more or less 33 million, and the amount that has been received from the Department of Basic Education is about 34 million, and the funds spent is 26 million, which makes about 77%. And so about 7.7 million was not spent, and 3.7 million was requested for rollover. And the reasons that are advanced are also echoing what the National Treasury has indicated, which are mainly around procurement systems and processes. The next slide. In the next slide, we are looking at the service delivery performance from a human resource point of view. The targeted number of educational psychologists was 7, and actual have been appointed, and we have 2 vacant posts. And then for chief educational therapists, target number was 7, and all of them have been appointed, 7 of them. And for chief education therapists, 7, have been targeted and 7 have been appointed, and chief educational therapists, 7 have been targeted and actual have been appointed, and lastly, senior education specialist, 7 was targeted and 7 have been appointed. Next slide. In this slide, we are looking at the procurement of tools of trade for the last financial year. And the item that was targeted was the laminating machines. The quantity was 7. In the next slide, the learning sites and learners that have been supported. The types of learning sites, 2 of them, special care centers and schools. In the case of the special care centers, the number of sites are 90 and the number of learners is 1,610. In the case of schools, the number of sites is 24 and the number of learners is 29. And we move to the next slide. In the case of LTSMs and assistive devices, the items that we're speaking to are 2. This LTSM for special care centers and assistive devices for individual use. The target for LTSM for special care centers was 90, and then actual procurement was 89. The items bought cover gross and fine motor skills related LTSMs, stationary and assistive devices. This will need to be used by any learner in the classroom. In the case of assistive devices for individual use, the target was 100 and the actual procurement was 102. And this cover 135 wheelchairs and 35 buggies. The next slide. In this slide, we're looking at training of transversal outreach teams, caregivers, teachers, therapists, and district officials. The target group, the first target group was the transversal itinerant outreach team members. The target was 35, and those who have been trained is 35. For caregivers, the target was 248, and only 108 have been trained. And then also teachers, 200 was the target, and the actual is 171. And 4 therapists were targeted and all of them were trained. And then 100 officials were targeted, but only 30 were trained. In the next slide, we focus on the therapeutic support that has been provided. The annual target was 560. And the actual is 184. And the type of therapeutic support was psychosocial support, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. In the next slide, we look at the use of the learning program. In the case of the special care centers, the number of learners who used this program is 318, and the number of report cards issued is also 318. And the number of schedules completed is 73. And then in the case of schools, the number of learners who used the learning program is 29, and all of them received the report cards, and the number of mark schedules completed was 5. In other words, the total out of the total of 347, 347 received the report cards, and number of schedules completed 78. The next slide. With regard to the response to COVID, the target for thermometers and consumables was 90, and the actual is 0. And types of resources procured, 0, none. And then in the case of ICT for remote support, the target was 40, and the actual is 40, and these were DVD players. Next slide. For this financial year, in the case of Q1, the allocation was 34 million, and the amount received from the Department of Basic Education is 34 million. And actual expenditure thus far is around 17%, and commitment is around 4 million, which translates to about 12%. And the expenditure, including commitments, is around 9.8 million, which translates into 29%, more or less. In the next slide, the challenges and mitigation measures. The first challenge is that 6 officials resumed duty in May this year, and therefore the compensation of employees, in other words, the salaries for April were not spent. And so that has been a challenge with regard to expenditure of COE. And the mitigation measure is that in the process of submitting the deviation request to DBE, we'll use the money to buy other assistive devices for learners. The second challenge is that 2 vacant posts for educational psychologists, the COE for those posts have not been spent. Mitigation is that the recruitment process has been initiated by HR and will be finalized in the next quarter. The third challenge is delayed submission of invoices by suppliers, which then necessitated delays in payments. And the mitigation measure is that a dedicated official has been tasked to manage the suppliers to expedite payments. The next slide. We thank you, Honorable Chair. That is the report from the Limpopo Department of Education.
Thank you very much from Limpopo province.
Did you switch off his speaking?
Okay. Can we then move on to the next province?
Oh, next province.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Mpumalanga.
The
next province
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Mrs. Lucy Moyani. I must apologize that I could not rename myself. I'm not Reverend Moyani, I'm Mrs. Moyani. I'm the HOD for the Department of Education in Mpumalanga. Chairperson, honorable members, Minister and the DM and all the other MECs and colleagues, good morning. I must first extend an apology from my honorable MEC B.A. Majuba. I know that he has sent a written apology to the committee, but I need to register his apology because he has been deployed to other government responsibilities, and he requested me to lead the delegation to this noble committee. Chairperson, with me, I'm with Mr. Elijah Nkosi, who is our Director for Math, Science and Technology, and he's also the Program Manager for the MST Conditional Grant. Through you, I would like to request Mr. Nkosi to lead us in this presentation, if you agree, Chairperson.
Agreed, welcome.
Thank you, Baba Nkosi. Over to you.
Thank you very much, HOD. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Greetings to you and all the honorable members of the committee and our colleagues from the different provinces. We are presenting on the MST conditional grant. The outputs have already been outlined earlier by National Treasury. If we can move to the next slide. This slide reflects on our expenditure for the 2021-22 financial year. We had a budget of 42,584,000. We did not have any adjustments because in the previous financial year, 2020-21, we did spend all our budget as expected. But in the year 2021-22, we did experience some glitches. So our expenditure was at 78%, and that was due to under expenditure on the ICT and also on the laboratory equipment, apparatus, and consumables outputs. In the next slide, we just clarify why we had challenges in expenditure. One was that an amount of about 6 million that relates to the laboratory equipment, etc., was loaded for payment, but could not be paid due to cash flow challenges. But we had also an amount of about 3 million that could not which invoice could not be submitted on time for payment. But having said that, Honorable Chair, these have already been settled and paid in the current financial year. Next slide. In terms of reporting on non-financial information, the things that we do on ICT, we have provided laptop trolleys, which consist of 40 laptops for 5 schools as per our plan. These are the schools that are offering CAT, which is a subject that requires computers, computer applications, technology, and some that are offering information technology. We've also provided coding and robotics kits to 128 primary schools that are piloting the project of coding and robotics in the province. We also had 68 secondary schools that also received laptops on the ICT area. On workshops for technical schools, we have provided 44 schools that are offering this technical subject with consumables for them to be able to conduct practical assessment tasks. We have also provided workbooks to support 24 schools that are offering engineering, graphics, and design, which is EGD. And on this item, we've also covered our agricultural schools that are offering agricultural management and practice. We provided tools and equipment. 10 of the schools benefited from this. On laboratory, science laboratories, we have provided manipulatives, mathematics kits to 17 foundation phase schools, grade 1 to 3, and 68 secondary schools that are offering physical sciences. We also provided them with consumables for practical work. And in the next slide, we speak to the other 2 main outputs for us. Learner support. We have provided organized learner camps for 1,281 learners, particularly focusing on those that have potential to give us distinctions. And we've also provided 3,000 study guides to our learners offering physical sciences across the province. This would be targeting learners that are progressed. And we've also supported 302 learners to participate in an oil and gas career guidance exhibition. And 625 of our learners were supported to participate in the mining and energy career exhibition as well. All this in an effort to inspire our learners for the love of math, science, and technology. We have also supported 3,900 97 learners for our internal competitions that are also inspiring from grade 3, 6, and 9. These are men's advancement competition, science advancement, and technology advancements. On teacher training, we conduct on quarterly basis workshop for our subject advisors in MST, 112 of them, and 1,507 teachers were trained on pedagogical and subject content knowledge. We do not have the item on coupons. Thank you. Next slide. For the first quarter of the year, financial year 2022-23, this is our expenditure. We have 43,833,000 this year, and we've managed to spend 4.8 million, and we've committed 12 million already. And at the end of the first quarter, our expenditure was at 11.1%, pushed by the outstanding payment of ICT from last year, but the other activities that we had for the quarter. We can move to the next slide. In terms of under expenditure, I think the point that I think we had made was that in our plan we projected 8% because we know that the first term is mainly for us to deal with procurement processes, and we start delivering resources in the second term or quarter. And I can confirm, Honorable Chair, that as I checked the expenditure this morning, I think we're already on par for the second quarter, end of September, because we're at 53%. So we've moved even faster than we had projected. That even though we project 8% for the first quarter, the second quarter is projected at 50% to align with the National Treasury benchmark. Next slide. In terms of challenges, we do not have much challenges. Over the years, we've been able to spend 100% of this grant and provide impact to our MST strategy. But we're focused on this line on our procurement process that as we speak now, 80% of the requests for quotations have been submitted, and 50% of them have been received and processed. Like I indicated that already our expenditure is at 52% because as at the end of June, we're working on this to make sure that we push the procurement process, and already 30%, which makes 80% to be committed by 30 September. And fortunately, we have already managed to make those commitments even by now, end of August. And what remains to do is to follow up on the suppliers that have been approved so that we fast track the delivery of the resources so that we become on par with the Treasury benchmarks for expenditure. And we reserve the 20% to deal with the last quarter of the financial year, which is the first quarter of the academic year. And we will also ensure that we fast track procurement so that we don't have delays that we're unable to pay come end of March for this financial year. Next slide. Oh, I'm done. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much to Limpopo Province. I think now we're going to move to the last province, which is the Western Cape. Then can we then invite the Western Cape?
Thank you, Chairperson. With your permission, Chair, as I upload the Western Cape presentation, Chair, I would like to also indicate that we received an apology from MSA Menier and HOD Mr. Walters, who are attending the Western Cape Cabinet Post-Berat today, Chairperson. And lastly, Chair, because after this, I'm not going to say a word, Chairperson. Chair, I want to thank the DG's office, Mr. Mweli himself, and also Mr. Mahada, Chairperson, for assisting me in coordinating this meeting, Chairperson. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Babalo. And then we will then give over to Western Cape.
Yeah, good morning, Chairperson. My name is Leon Eli. I'm the CFO for the Western Cape Education Department. Just again, apologies for my minister and also for the HOD again. We have two presenters, Chairperson, for this, the one for the additional grant for learners with severe to profound intellectual disability, and then another presenter for the mathematics, science, and technology grant as well. So I will give over to Ms. Berenice Daniels. She's a program manager for the Lspid grant. And then I'll also give over then later on to Mr. Don Harry Prasad, who's also the program manager for the Math, Science, and Technology grant. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good morning, honourable members, colleagues, and all the other delegates in the room. So the purpose of this presentation is to report to yourselves on progress with the learners with severe and profound intellectual disability conditional grant. Next slide, please. So the report will focus on the 2021-2022 expenditure service delivery in the first quarter of this financial year, and also challenges that contributed to under-expenditure and mitigation strategies. So for the last financial year, the total allocation as per the DORA was 28,553,000. We also received 339,000 in terms of a rollover. We spent by the end of March of 2022, 21,450,000. The balance of 7,441,000 is fully committed, and so we're requesting the total amount for rollover. The reasons for not spending 100% of the allocation is due to supply chain challenges that have since been resolved. Some of the equipment that is needed for these children with severe and profound intellectual disabilities, not all that easily available, but I think that we now have come to agreement with our SEM colleagues, and things are proceeding smoothly. Next slide. In terms of the COE, or the human resources part of the grant, we had 2 vacant posts in the previous financial year, but all the other posts for chief education therapists, senior education specialists, and provincial grant manager were filled in the last financial year. Next slide. In terms of service delivery performance, types of learning sites, number of learners, we have 64 special care centres, a total of 1,853 learners. We also have 37 learners that we have placed in public schools. So total number of sites then, we have Lspid, 69, total number of learners, 1,890. Then in terms of learning and teaching support material, what are the kinds of items we bought? Stationery, furniture, steel cabinets, top-up LTSM for implementation of the learning program. We provided that to 62 special care centres. Although the target was 75, we do not have that many in the province. many of these special care centers are quite small. They often are NGO run, so many of them closed, particularly during the COVID period. So they are now 62, and the LTSM was procured for the 62. Next slide. Then in terms of training, and bearing in mind that the 2021-2022 financial year also spanned a period of COVID-19 lockdown, and some of the special care centers opened even later than our schools. The number of transversal itinerant outreach team members that were trained, 27 out of the 30, but we've had vacancies, and as you saw, we currently only have 2, or we in that period we had 2 that were unfilled by the end of the period. Caregivers, we managed to train 409 of the caregivers. Difficulties once again during the lockdown period. Similarly with teachers, we managed to reach 169 teachers. We're catching up with that now in this financial year, but last financial year was quite a disrupted year due to rotational learning, lockdowns, etc. 42 therapists were trained and 24 officials. Then in terms of access to therapeutic services, and that includes occupational therapy, speech therapy, physiotherapy, and or psychosocial report, we targeted 300 learners, but we actually exceeded our target by 32, so 330 learners had access to therapeutic services. Next slide. Then, as you will know, there is a curriculum or a learning program for learners with profound intellectual disability. 935 learners are using the learning program. They get report cards, just as learners in ordinary schools get report cards. All of them got report cards, and we completed 56 mark schedules. Then there are learners in our public schools as well who are using the program. 31 and 31 report cards were issued, 5 mark schedules completed. So those at the bottom line is just the totals: 966 learners, 966 report cards, and 61 sites. Next slide. In terms of thermometers and consumables, 62 centers received thermometers and consumables in response to COVID-19. And as I've explained, there are only those 62 centers, and that includes sanitizing, cleaning material as per COVID-19 requirements. ICT for remote support, 60 centers received data and data dongles. Those are the centers that require that. Next slide. Then coming to this financial year, the first quarter, as at 30 June, we were allocated 33,451,000. We received 10 million. By the end of June, we had actually spent 5,347,000, but we have commitments of 6,046,000. So our actual expenditure together with commitments is 11,393,000. Next slide. So the challenges that we've experienced, as I mentioned at the beginning, delay in supply chain processes, but these have been resolved, and there are dedicated staff who have become familiar with the kinds of equipment, resources that are needed by these children, and they've been identified to manage procurement regarding the Lspid grant, and so things are moving quite quickly now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. So over to Don Hariprasad. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Good morning. All protocols observed, Minister, MECs, and other senior colleagues. Yeah, the MST conditional grant in the Western Cape, this grant obviously is provided for in terms of the Division of Revenue Act. And the purpose is to provide schools, learners, and teachers with resources to increase learner participation and success rate in maths subjects, MST subjects in the whole country. These are the grant outputs: information communication ICT resources, including ICT integration, provisioning of machinery, equipment, and tools for the technical workshops, provisioning of science laboratory equipment, manipulatives, apparatus, and consumables, learner support programs, including competitions, camps, etc. for learners, and also teacher support programs with a particular focus and emphasis of training of teachers and supporting subject advisors to enhance their competencies. Next slide. In terms of the expenditure for 21-22, the department received an allocation of 36 million. We distributed that according to the different, as per the guidelines of the grant framework in terms of the different categories. And in terms of the actual appropriation of the funds during the course of the year, we had an adjustment budget of another 18 million, which was a rollover from the previous year, which eventually brought us to a total of 54 million. The rollover for the previous year was based on a commitment of suppliers to actually deliver tools and equipment to all the schools earmarked for that provisioning. Of the 54 million, we actually managed to spend 45 million. And we also then subsequently had a challenge with regard to the provisioning or the supply. Although we had completed the procurement supply chain processes, there were challenges with some of the suppliers in terms of the not being able to deliver all of the items. One of which was for example, the workshop equipment and machinery. There was one or two outstanding items that was delayed due to global supply chain challenges, imported items. The laboratory challenges was also linked to that, and also the learner support program. We had allocated a certain sum of money to provide mathematical calculators, and there was a challenge with the supplier receiving the stock in hand. Next slide. Well, we committed all of the funds for that particular year. Some of the reasons I already explained. What we've done is we had a challenge, particularly around the science equipment and the calculators. There was one challenge with a bidder, and we had to re-advertise the tender, so that also created a further challenge. We have a 3-year contract in place, and these procurement of the services will continue much faster in the next following years. However, some of the suppliers still, after they receive the purchase orders annually, they then are subjected to import some of the items, and that also is leading to some of the delays. We're fortunate in the sense that most of the commitments are made, although the delivery challenges are from the suppliers and not the internal processes of the department, which we managed to resolve over the last few years. The current situation is that the calculators, we also worked with the suppliers and engaged with their suppliers, and we finally got to know as early as at the beginning of this month, that the calculators that were scheduled to arrive in South Africa has arrived, and the current supplier is busy delivering those items, and we hope that should be completed by the end of this month. Next slide. The ICT, we did make provisions for 117 schools to be provided with specific ICT hardware such as data projectors, 3D printers, and visualizers. 100 schools supplied with ICT LAN infrastructure in accordance with the minimum specifications for math, science, and telematics program. We also, just to indicate that the telematics program is being broadcasted to poorer schools in the department, and we have to refresh and also repair some of the equipment for that to happen. 76 schools were supplied with subject-specific ICT software such as AutoCAD, AliCAD, and simulation software for technical subjects. Next slide. With regard to the workshop, technical workshops, machinery and equipment and tools, we provided 35 technical and agricultural schools with the maintenance and maintenance of the machinery and equipment. 40 technical and agricultural schools were supplied with workshop equipment and consumables for technical subjects, and 80 schools offering engineering, graphics, and design was provided with drawing equipment and instruments. Next slide. The laboratory equipment, we provided 125 FET and GET MST schools were supplied with the laboratory equipment and apparatus for mathematics, science, and technology. 66 laboratories supplied with consumables for mathematics, science, and technology. 13 agricultural schools supplied with animal handling facilities. 240 GET schools supplied with life sciences kits and life sciences for the foundation phase. 50 GET schools supplied with natural sciences and technology kits for intermediate phase 4 to 6 and for grade 7. Next slide. With regard to learner support and MST subjects, competition and camps, 9,866 learners were registered and participated in MST and in Olympiads, science fairs, expos, and a robotics competition. 433 learners participate in the SAICA camps. This is also in partnership with the SAICA. They have been a long-standing relationship with them over the last few years to support enhanced learning performance in maths and science, including accounting. There's 10,000 mathematics learners were supplied with calculators. The delivery obviously will be completed by the end of this month. Next slide. Teacher training and support for subject advisors. 1,813 teachers and subject advisors attended targeted structured training in MST subjects, as well as for coding and robotics. 759 teachers and subject advisors participated in professional development, breakaway workshops, and content training in MST subjects, a MISA conference, maths and materials development, life sciences, physical science, technical sciences. All of them received content training. Next. With regard to the expenditure, this particular graphs indicate the current expenditure, sorry, the expenditure for the current and the previous years. And we basically are on track, and maybe the next slide will give more details in terms of the actual figures. Next slide. Here we can see that although we have been, historically carrying a rollover, we certainly, that rollover was based on commitments. You'll notice, although there's an overspend of almost 26%, that was largely attributed to the adjustment that needed to have been made for the rollover that was provided for, and we managed to spend all of that money, and therefore it seems to be appearing as if it's a overspend. In the current circumstances, we have actually spent almost 15% of the budget. There is also a commitment, I think, of another. I'll show you in the next slide the commitments that have been made already for the current budget. Next.
Hello. Any problem? Babalo?
Hello, Chairperson. I'm here, Chair. I think we are still connected, but I suspect that the colleague has been disconnected. Maybe you may invite anyone from the Western Cape to proceed with the presentation in the meantime.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay,
Mr.
Eli, is it possible that you can take further these expenditure slides?
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. Just as far as expenditure is concerned, so as you can see, for 2021, we spent 70 million rand compared to the budget of 37.7 million rand. And then for the financial year, that also we indicated previously that there were certain rollovers in that regard as well. And then for the financial year 2021-2022, we had a budget of 54.7 million rand, and we spent 45.8 million rand of that as well. For the current year, we have a budget of 46 million rand, and we spent 5.6 million rand of that as well. I think, Chair, from our side for the expenditure as of to date, I think we are well on track as far as expenditure for the current year is concerned. Given the some of the challenges we had in the past around supply chain, which has been resolved, it's now just issues around delivery, which is happening at the moment. If I move on to the next slide, I think in terms of the next slide, as you can see here, Chair, we've got commitments for the various items in terms of visualizers, electrical consumables, life skills equipment, and natural science equipment. You can see there's the order numbers as well. So those are with our suppliers, and these are being attended to at this particular point in time. Following slide, next slide, please. Yeah, I think, Chair, this is just in terms of progress for where we are. So yeah, this is the slide just gives an indication of everything that Mr. Haripasat was really indicated in terms of delivery and etc. And that's it from our side. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you very much to Western Cape. I think that was our last presentation. And I think we have done well with the time. And now we will, in terms of the presentations, in terms of the expenditures of the different provinces, we received a presentation from National Treasury, and also we received input from the Minister, Honorable Minister of Basic Education, and we received presentations from 5 provinces, which are the Eastern Cape, Free State, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Western Cape. So that is in terms of the content of this meeting. So we will then allow members to make inputs, clarities, questions, and Lubabala, you will indicate as the hands. Who are the hands which are up? Can you give, I think, Honorable Ryder, Honorable Molotsane, those are the 2 hands that I'm having here now.
Honorable Dwight.
Honorable Dwight. Okay, let's then follow the sequence that we then say Honorable Molotsane will start, Honorable Ryder, and Honorable Dwight. Let's take that sequence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Acting Chairperson. Let me first acknowledge the presentation and also apologize for the poor network where I am. That makes me not to open my video. Hence, I was not even able to see the presentations on the screen. My first questions will go to the Free State province. Having realized that they've got less trained caregivers than expected, do they have enough manpower in their province of the caregivers to carry the workload? Secondly, the vacancies hamper negatively on the delivery of progress. How soon will they fill the vacant posts? Then my last question goes to the Treasury. In your presentation, you mentioned that some provinces don't report on monitoring of MST programs. Which provinces are those? Lastly, Acting Chairperson, having realized that trained caregivers are leaving centers due to not receiving the subsidies from the Department of Social Development. Why not migrate the whole program to the Department of Education so that it can be able to resolve the issue of subsidies? Thank you, Acting Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Molotsane. Honorable Ryder.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I think the presentations are noted. Thank you. I do want to voice perhaps a bit of disappointment. I think that this is obviously an area that demands absolute focus, and when money is made available, it really should be spent on these very needy people and people that are otherwise forgotten, and really it's people that are at the mercy of the state generally. So I do think that urgency across all provinces needs to be increased. Really, without getting into the detail of each presentation, I think all of the provinces have indicated that they have a reasonable understanding of where their shortcomings are, and they are all taking steps to fix that. I think it's something that we, as a committee, need to monitor and ensure that we are representing the beneficiaries as we can. However, there is a risk always of turning things straight into just seeing a set of numbers and taking the humanity out of a topic like this. So what I'd like to establish is pretty much how many people are served. And it's a difficult question, and possibly one that we won't have immediate answers for. But if I can get some sort of an indication, probably more on a national level, Minister, than on individual provincial levels. But how many beneficiaries are we actually serving through this grant, and how many haven't we got to yet? So how many people with severe mental disabilities are outside of the system and haven't been catered for yet? I think that would be the best question I could pose for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ryder. Honorable De Tweet.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I'll be brief. I appreciate the presentations that was flighted today. It's unfortunate that the Northwest isn't represented here. It would have been nice to see what they have to put on the table. Chair, one question pertains to procurement. I know that it's difficult to receive your budget and then basically start the process from there, but I want you to know, is there any way that one could maybe preempt or plan ahead to see what the requirements for the following year will be, and to start placing preliminary orders with regards to that? Referring specifically to the calculators that will only be delivered next month, if I recall correctly. Just to see that the training tools is available in time. One of the provinces mentioned that the actual training couldn't take place because there were not any training tools available. I mean, that's unfortunate. The children they are losing learning time. So if you could maybe have an opinion on that, it would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable De Tweet. Are there any further hands, Lubabalo?
Yes,
any further hands? Honorable Karim?
Yes.
Honorable Karim?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I think it's very, very good, Chairperson, that we are having this focus on this topic. Yes, we did get a briefing from Treasury last year, I recall, but it's not as focused as this. So firstly, I think it's very good, but we should also, Chair, as you know, I think most of us here agree, avoid this feel-goodism. The real test is to what extent the commitments made, especially by the provinces, are implemented. And I think that since we've got this thing going in the focused manner we have, excuse me, I don't see why we shouldn't call the provinces and National Treasury before us this time next year to see what progress has occurred since we had this focus, this meeting. Chairperson, as you know, I mean, obviously you're a newer member, but those of us who are older, we've been through this many times, Chairperson. People say wonderful things to us at national and provincial. It's not directed to any individual personally. We politicians are even more guilty of that, maybe, who knows. And we're not necessarily setting a good example to the civil service ourselves by our endless commitments in reports that we never follow up on. So I think really we should call them all back next year. Secondly, we should do this work of oversight, but we also need to avoid, Chairperson, substitutionism, where we do the work that has to be done by the provincial committees of finance and education. I mean, they are immediately responsible for the spending by their provinces. They're a sphere of government. They know their provinces better than we do, except in the case of each of us coming from the province, we do. But, you know, how could I know personally what's going on in Limpopo to the extent that an MPL in Limpopo in these two committees would be able to? So one suggestion I've got is, I gather Pulalani Lomo's not here. He's busy in the Section 194 Inquiry Commission. It's a pity because he's so good. But we have other people here, the researcher, the committee secretaries, who are also very good. I think they should put like a 2-page report together of the issues that arise here. And we should get you to write to the provincial chairpersons, your counterparts, and well, we do not have appropriations committees, I gather, but at least the finance committee and the education committees, basic education committees. I think we should write to them. And obviously we can't prescribe to them, Chairperson, but we can at least gently, not nudge them, let's say request them to monitor this. You see, they could do it more on a quarterly basis. I mean, this is such an important topic, Chairperson. I must say, it didn't hit me so hard until, you know, listening to all of this and browsing through the submissions made. It's the provincial legislatures. It's the provincial legislatures that must hold the departments to direct account. And we can confer with them. And maybe what we could do, if it's appropriate, we can discuss it with Frank Jenkins, that we actually, you know, ask the chairpersons of these committees at the very least to be here. I think we always do, but to, like, you know, negotiate a date with all of them well beforehand so that they too are here and they can perhaps also, you see, they're not accountable to us. I think Frank will tell us that, you know, the provincial legislature is not accountable to the NCOP in that direct sense. Well, I'm not even sure in any sense. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But at least, you know, we can secure their participation. They can tell us what their committees have been doing. If the chairs can't come, then somebody from the committee who can tell us what they've done. Because, you see, we're creating a momentum here, Chairperson. Now, we don't want to lose this. So I'm focusing mostly on the practical issues. Now, on the other issues, look, I don't know that I want to get too involved personally in what each province is doing. But the general thing is also I know Treasury does a lot of work. I know they're overburdened and understaffed. I think, Chairperson, that they need to be monitoring this more effectively. So, for example, to make the general statement, as happens in so many different programs, the money doesn't get spent for the first few months, and then at the last quarter, things are rushed and so on, because the quality of the outcome is reduced because it's partly influenced by meeting a deadline. Although I see you've allowed rollover. So I think there's something has to be done about this. But presumably it's not easy because we've been raising these things since, I think, the first term of this parliament, democratic parliament. And sometimes we do make progress, and sometimes we have several steps back, and so we come forward again. I don't know what we've done, but I really would like Treasury to respond whether they can do more than they are doing to ensure that the spending is evenly spread across the year. I am surprised, though, that they're giving rollovers, Chairperson. I don't know what the criteria is. I support it, Chairperson. Obviously, most of us in this committee, if not all, would support the rollovers in this case. But why is there like a glib, if you like? Sorry for not finding the right word. National Treasury says, well, there are rollovers and we allow it. Why in this case and not other cases? Although I'm saying, Chairperson, I think most of us will support it. Then just two things I'll pick up on. The Free State, right? What was the reason for not procuring the storage containers? If I'm correct, it's zero. I didn't hear an explanation for why this is the case. And secondly, Limpopo has only filled 2 vacant posts out of 34. Now, by any measure, Chairperson, this is astonishing. Maybe they want to explain to us why that is the case. Finally, Chairperson, the ultimate test of what we're doing is action, not words. Words may guide us, but it's real action. But the words are meaningless unless it's action. So action from ourselves as a committee. At the very least, we can do one review next year, or even a 6-monthly one, if we have the time and space. Secondly, a summary of what's come out of this meeting for the provincial chairs of those 2 committees referred to. Thirdly, ensuring that those committee chairs and or their representatives are here next year to perhaps give us some sense. They're not required to report to us of what they've been doing. Fourthly, a letter to those chairs requesting them kindly to take these things forward. And I don't know what else can be done, Chairperson. Maybe the other committee members who've got ideas, but we need action, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karim. Are there any further hands? Honorable Okam?
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson. Yeah, Deputy Chairperson, I can just add on to what the Honorable Karim said. I agree that National Treasury indicated that most of the spending happens in the beginning of the year. We must be careful that it's not fiscal dumpage and wastage that happens at the end of the year. This should not be acceptable. Honorable Chairperson, also with regards to the Free State, there was a target of 252 caregivers which were not appointed. This is a concern as it hampers government's efforts to create the most needed employment opportunities. What was the reason for this non-achievement, and what impact does this have on the delivery on the ground? What is being done to address this? Limpopo, as was said, has only filled 2 vacant posts out of 34. Why are these posts not being filled as budgeted for, and when will these posts be filled? Then again, with regards to Limpopo reported 0 procurement of the target of 90 thermometers. What is the reason for this, and how is this being addressed? Limpopo has also reported an underachievement in the target of caregivers as well as teachers. What is the reason for this underachievement, and how will that also be addressed by them? With regards to the Western Cape, Western Cape has underachieved on targets around caregivers and teachers as well, therapists and officials. What is the cause of this, and what will be done to mitigate these factors? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Okamp. Can we just look at any further hands? Lubabala. If there are no further hands, I think I would just, from the point of the chair, also raise my input on National Treasury, believing that there are a planning and evaluation method for spending. So the issue or the matter on the slow spending on the beginning of the year, and then only at the end of the year that we are seeing that there is now fast tracking in terms of spending. So I would also just want to emphasize that as to the monitoring and evaluation of the planning of departments and provinces around the spending. So I just want also to emphasize on that one, because that will be a point across all provinces, how National Treasury is dealing with that. So that spending is only slow spending in the beginning, and then only we see spending in the end of the year. Now we are sitting with rollovers and all those things. So I think that will be my point. And then if there are no more hands, and then we'll give over to National Treasury and then also to the provinces to respond on the questions raised by the members. The Minister, Honorable Minister, if there's anything, I will also allow Honorable Minister to make an input before we give to National Treasury.
No, thank you very much. No, thank you very much, Chair. I maybe will ask our DDG Gear to respond, but I can also say, because as national, our main function really is not to implement or spend, but it's to monitor. And on a monthly basis, we get financial statements on all these funds, because they are ring-fenced through national, and we have to monitor spending and non-spending. What we also discourage is that if there's no plan that we're satisfied with, we don't release the money. As much as we don't want to underspend, but we also don't want to throw in or throw money to provinces when we are not convinced that there's a plan. So maybe let me ask DDG Gear to respond to some of the questions raised by members. But all I wanted to say is that we monitor almost on a monthly basis, engage with the MECs, the DG and different heads department, interact with different heads of provinces who are or line function heads in provinces to really establish where the problems are. And as I said at the beginning, Chair, where we can learn from each other, exchange resource experiences, but also because there's also the capacity that if there's a contract that is working in one provinces are able to temporarily get onto it whilst they're sorting out their procurements. But members are quite correct that it's always disturbing that term one things start well and can see that when they start well, it's because of accruals. It's not because they're spending properly. And then after they've paid accruals, then there's a slight dip and then it picks up later. And our contention that if the plan is in place, you shouldn't have that pattern. You should be able to really have a proper pyramid moving towards the end so that in January, there's no panic of underspending because there's been poor planning. But let me not take too much of your time, Chair, and ask DDG to respond. And Chair, if you don't mind, I'm flying to Eastern Cape now, so I have to leave the meeting because my flight is at 2, so I have to at least leave the house at 12. And so I have to go and get ready and then leave the house because I have to be at the airport at least by 12, by 1. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And I think let me use this opportunity to thank you, Honorable Minister, for your presence at this meeting, which add value, which we are greatly appreciated for you to attend this meeting. You are released, Honorable Minister, so we will then hear from the DDG.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to committee members.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. DDG.
Honorable Chairperson, the DG is in the house and his hand is up. So maybe we should allow for him to come in first, please.
Yes, he's welcome.
Apologies, DG, I didn't see you. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, DG, you may come in. Welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister. Chair, I just wanted to respond to maybe two things. The first one was the question raised by the honorable member about the actual numbers that the grant for learners with profound and profound and severe intellectual disabilities is covering. The figures that we have is 9,797. And this figure is further disaggregated into numbers that are provided per province. And that detail we can provide to your honorable committee, honorable chair. Just to add to what the minister said, indeed, we have strengthened our monitoring. We do accept that part of the problem is around planning, around monitoring and execution. Before, we used to have a unit which is still doing that, which goes out to provinces and monitor the performance of these grants. We've now strengthened monitoring. We are monitoring at the Council of Education Ministers, presenting reports there. We are also presenting reports at the level of the heads of education department, HEADCOM. We have now brought in the third layer where we are meeting with heads every month to avoid the March spike that honorable members talked about, so that we avoid that going forward. And there seems to be some improvement ever we started with that, monitoring on a monthly basis, meeting as heads of education to look at what is happening instead of just waiting for the reports that are coming to committees that I've referred to. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members, for the immense privilege. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG. Thank you very much. And now we will go to the specific questions which was raised to the specific provinces. We will start in the sequence of Eastern Cape, Free State, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Western Cape, just to give us a response on the questions which was raised from the members. Eastern Cape, if there's any questions. Was there any questions, Lubabana, to Eastern Cape?
No, thanks, Chair. This is Kwasa from the Eastern Cape. No, Chair, I didn't pick up any question, but I think there were general questions that were just soliciting a commitment on our part to improve the spending. Indeed, we are committing to improve the spending and also address the issues also raised by members as well as the minister. That indeed, if there is poor planning, you are likely to see improvements in the first quarter being driven by accruals, especially the spending. And we're taking note of that. We will be ready for the session that Honorable Karim is proposing, if we can be called next year to account for what we've done. We are committing that we'll make improvements and also focus on this early procurement of the needs for 2023, starting in the current financial year, rather than to leave it to the actual implementation year. So I just wanted to raise that point, that we are committing ourselves to the issues raised, and we welcome this engagement with the Select Committee, because it points to critical areas of weakness that we need to attend to. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much to Eastern Cape. Any questions that was raised to Free State?
Thank you, Chairperson. I will start with the one of filling of posts. And I commit that by the 1st of November, we shall have filled the post. And I want to just raise the challenge here isn't that we don't advertise this post, but we are not attracting firstly, a lot of applicants and also people that qualify. The last conditional grant post, we set on it, I think it was in June, and there were only 2 applicants. And what we've now, together with DPE, with the National Coordinator for LSPID, we agreed that we are going to advertise wide and broad, like DPSA websites, DPE websites, so that we can attract more people. Because if we do it provincially, it has proven that it's not bearing any results for us. So hence I'm having that commitment then. Secondly, on the training of caregivers, I will couple it with the last one on not appointing caregivers. I think maybe it was misunderstood. We do have 252 caregivers. However, they were not trained in the last quarter of the last financial year. And linking it now to service delivery and capacity. Yes, we do have a capacity to train the caregivers. Secondly, though it might seem as if maybe it disadvantaged service delivery, it didn't, because here we're talking about the cascade training, and yearly we train our caregivers. So these are just, again, catch up and follow-up trainings. Further than that, as these teams are itinerant, when they get to a center and they see that maybe the presentation of the learning program is not accordingly on site, they assist the caregiver to do it right. If it's on maybe how should a child sit, they assist. So over and above that big training that we have that is central, on an ongoing basis, on weekly basis, people are being coached to do the right thing. However, by this, I don't want to justify that we didn't train, but I just want to say with service delivery, it didn't impact. So already in this, when we report again for the second quarter, you will see that we've trained them now in this. Lastly, we always plan our training for the beginning of an academic year, because of really the turnover of caregivers at the centers is very high. Like Honorable Meletsani said, that it's very high. We don't have control. We get new caregivers, we must train them again. So we normally then check beginning of the financial year, of the academic year. So that's why then that national directive was disadvantageous for us in this case. Then coming to the last question on the containers. Yes, we didn't buy any containers. We had a situation in the last financial year where in one district, we lost all 4 itinerant team members. They applied to different institutions. VETS also took one of them. So there was no needs analysis done at that district that time. However, we requested other teams, because we only have one official there. We requested other teams to assist. Now we do have the needs analysis, then we're going to procure those containers. Needs analysis not as to set targets, but needs analysis to say, where are we going to put this? Is it right? Is it safe? That now the questions. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Free State. Then let's go to the next province in terms of specific questions. Limpopo.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. From Limpopo, regarding the vacant post of educational psychologist, we did advertise, and we only received a few number of applications. And for that reason, we could not manage to get the 7 that we were targeting. However, we are working with HR department, and we are working on advertising the 2 vacant posts. we envisage that by the end of December, we would have completed all the processes, the interviewing processes and the vetting, etc. And if everything goes according to our plan, we will have the new psychologist resuming duty in January. In relation to the training, indeed, we didn't reach the targets for training as we planned. We targeted to train 200 teachers, and we also targeted to train 248 caregivers, but that was not achieved, mainly because since COVID in 2020, our care centers closed. They only opened mid-2021. And during that time, only 57 opened and 42 were still closed. So for that reason, we could not train all of them. And we hope that now that they are all opening in operation, we will be able to achieve our target. That was the main reason. With the teachers, we targeted 200, we only managed to train 171. And this was due to emergencies that happened during the training, like ill health, which we could not control. We targeted to procure 90 thermometers for our care centers, but because we provided them with PPE during COVID in 2020, and since they were at home and not using the PPEs, when they reopened in mid-2021, they were still having enough, hence we could not procure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Responses from the provinces. Now we receive from Limpopo, the next province, questions that was raised to Mpumalanga. Let me, before Mpumalanga is coming in, just to acknowledge that we did have both ministers in this meeting, the minister and the deputy minister. So after Western Cape, we will also just request the deputy minister, as the minister have left, to make an input. Now we are with Mpumalanga.
Thank you, Chairperson. With Mpumalanga, there were no specific questions on the presentation, but we acknowledge the concerns that have been raised by the members in terms of the delays in the procurement processes, or also in the spending patterns. We want to commit, Chairperson, that as Mpumalanga last year for us was an outlier. Since the advent of the conditional grant, we have spent 100% of the conditional grant, and only last year we did not spend as expected. We are aware of the challenges. We did have a challenge, or can I say misunderstanding between ourselves and the SITA, which we have since resolved. And we are able to move now, as we have indicated that as we are speaking, our expenditure has already increased to 52%. So we commit, Chairperson, that would not have the March spike and would be implementing and spending according to the business plan. Indeed, we do submit our reports to the DBE and to also the oversight bodies in the province. And we just want to allay fears and commit to this committee that indeed we will improve in terms of delivery of the program. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks a lot. Thanks very much to Mpumalanga province. The last province questions which was raised, Western Cape.
Thank you, Chairperson. So a specific question was asked by Honourable Okan to the Western Cape. What is the cause of underachievement? So the slide being referred to was the 2021-2022 service delivery performance, and it was about the training of outreach teams, caregivers, teachers, therapists, and district officials. So the year under review was a year where the special care centers, as mentioned earlier, were closed, and they reopened much later than the schools, only from about July of last year. We managed to train 409 of the 618 caregivers. So we had a backlog because the centers were closed, but we trained as many as we could. In terms of the teachers came back to curriculum catch up, a lot of overload, but nevertheless, we managed to get 169 of our teachers trained. When it comes to therapists, we provided training to about half of the therapists. And if you look at on that same slide, access to therapeutic services, we exceeded our annual target. So a lot of the therapists were providing therapeutic intervention to these learners who had just come back after long absence to the special care centers. We trained as many of the therapists as possible. And then similarly with the officials, we also were faced with competing demands for training. But I think that it was an unusual year, and we are on track this year to do the training that we planned. Then just to clarify that the caregivers are paid via a subsidy in this province from the Department of Health or the Department of Social Development. So there's also a great deal of turnover of caregivers because the subsidy that they get, the special care centers, means that it's quite low and the caregivers are not well paid. I know that Honorable Molitsani did ask the question about whether the whole program should be migrated to DOH instead of them getting the DSD subsidy. So that has been raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To the Western Cape. I think we'll give a few comments from the Honorable welcome to the Honorable Deputy Minister to make remarks, and then just to double check again from National Treasury, is there anything from National Treasury, and then we'll close after that. Honorable Deputy Minister, you are invited. You're welcome. Honorable Deputy Minister.
Hello,
Okay.
Chair.
Yes, Barbara.
It looks like the Deputy Minister is disconnected, Chairperson.
Okay, for the time being, can we, National Treasury, any comments?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yes, I think we had two questions. So the first one about which provinces are not reporting, I'll ask Emmanuel Pillay to respond on that. But I think in the main, the one about how are we monitoring the provincial spending, perhaps to wait for later in the year, maybe just to reassure the members that like DBE, you also get expenditure on a monthly basis from provinces, from departments through the provincial treasuries they submit to us. And members will know that on a quarterly basis, we publish such expenditure information. But what we also do, we do have a monitoring specifically for conditional grants, where on a quarterly basis, we meet with the sector to look at the issues that have been raised and try to get a sense of how these issues are going to be addressed. And just to indicate that even from what we do have something we call provincial budget visits, which we just concluded on the 12th of August, where we go to each province, we meet with particularly the big sectors, understand how they're spending their budget even from the previous year, understand what are the mitigating measures they're going to put in place for where there is a problem with spending. And we also raise those issues in terms of, like Honorable Karim was saying, the issues around rollovers, in terms of, we also raise those issues to say, a particular province, you've been underspending in this regard on conditional grants. And for that matter, perhaps your funds were not even committed. Then that results in the funds being sent to, being returned to the National Revenue Fund, while there is still a need on the ground. So just to also assure members that we do follow a process as outlined in the Division of Revenue Act, and also in terms of the Treasury regulations about what do we consider for approval for rollover requests. So where there are no commitments, we don't. And such commitment, I think Eastern Cape did indicate in terms of the accruals they had or on one of the grants, around, I think, 4.4 million rand that they had accruals there. So such commitments which are firm, where the goods were ordered, they're not able to give rollovers to such. So also to indicate that even the March spike, also we do monitor that. We have kind of identified the sectors that tend to do that. But on a monthly basis, we do monitor, because for each province, we have a team, because specifically from our side, we are called provincial budget analysis. So our role essentially is just to oversee the implementation of provincial budgets. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Emmanuel to answer the first question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Khali. So, Chair, if the comment around the sort of non-reporting, if you look at slide 5 of our presentation, that's where I made the comment regarding 2 indicators by 2 provinces where we didn't have any information there. So perhaps my apologies, but I wasn't very clear there. It's not that the province is not reporting entirely. It's just that they're not doing so on all the indicators. So those are the 2 examples that I did indicate, where I think it was Gauteng and Limpopo, where you find they reported on one and not on the other, or they reported on 1 out of 3 indicators. So that's an issue that we will be following up on with our engagements with the sector as well. As Khali mentioned, we are now involved with the sectoral quarterly meetings as well, where we hear firsthand what the issues are in provinces, and then try to address it from there, and also provide any guidance that we can from a division of revenue perspective, and highlight any risks that we take, and we obviously note it and report it in terms of that. We do support the National Department of Basic Education in their efforts as well. For example, if they want to use any levers in the division of revenue to enforce performance or compliance in terms of the Act, we do consider the requests and approve if we are in agreement with it there. Just one issue around Honorable Detoy mentioned around the planning, and if there is any way we can look at preempting the planning, so that planning doesn't begin on the 1st of April. Just to indicate, the Division of Revenue allocations, if you look at it, the first year is appropriated, but the second and third year, you have indicative allocations. So the sector and provinces should know what they are going to receive in the second and third year of that. You do have your extraordinary events such as COVID, where we had to adjust the allocation significantly, but generally there's not material changes to the allocations. So the sector and provinces should have a guide in terms of what they should be planning in terms of the second and third year anyway. And they do receive allocation letters from National Treasury. before the beginning of the financial year, well before, so that can assist in the planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much to National Treasury. Lubabalo, can we, is the Deputy Minister available?
No,
Lubabalo?
no, Mr. Nzatu, the Deputy Minister is not back yet.
Okay.
Just accepted the DG now. So I do not know whether you still need to engage the DG or you want to close the meeting, but over to you. No, in fact, there are also members from provincial portfolio committees who have attended this meeting. Yeah, but anyway, they normally participate when they want to, but I just thought let my attention.
Okay, Lubabalo. Let me double check. Are there any further, because we are now close to 12 o'clock as the meeting scheduled for 9 to 12, but I will not lock anyone out. If there's anything that one thinks that is important to raise, we will give that opportunity. As we have said that the meeting for today was that we received presentations from National Treasury. We received presentations from 5 provinces, which are the Eastern Cape, Free State, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and the Western Cape on their expenditure on education. We did receive the input from the Minister and the DG. In terms of feedback, members have raised questions and we did receive responses. So that's why now I'm just double checking whether there's anything that is still that anyone needs to raise. Okay. If in the absence of no questions and no clarities, and let me then use this opportunity to thank the members of the Select Committee for the contributions that they have made in the engagements with National Treasury and also with the 5 provinces, and also to thank the Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister in their absence as they have left already due to other commitments, and also to thank the members from the different provinces who we believe were in the meeting. We're grateful for your presence to get first-hand information, and then also to thank the staff for the success of this meeting. And we believe that this meeting was a success, and we want to thank everybody. And on that note, to say that the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable
colleagues.
Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
I think what saved us was that